Feeling kind of crappy today, but the things I do for history. So Heather gave us a nice little lead up into the Renaissance and kind of an overview of how that started. So I want to give a bit of a different perspective on how that started and how that kind of went down. I want to do that based on a few key figures, mostly in Florence, who helped jumpstart a lot of the ideas and cultural trends that made the Renaissance work. Before we can even get started, I want to be politically correct here. Academics have stopped using the word Renaissance in the past few years or so. The reason for that is it's kind of a silly term. The word Renaissance in French means to be reborn, and nothing was really being reborn in the Renaissance. We always had brains and we always had good artists. We're just finally recognizing them in this Renaissance period. So, as a new term, they've started calling it the early modern period, and they say that because of exactly what Heather said, that a lot of the trends and ideas and cultural norms that we see today in our modern culture started here. So, let's talk about some people. We'll start in 1300, which is the date that people start to say the Renaissance starts gaining a little bit of steam. In 1304, Dante Alighieri publishes the Divine Comedy. Well, the first book in the Divine Comedy, the Inferno. The Inferno and the Divine Comedy is the story of Dante traveling through the 7 layers of hell and eventually purgatory and heaven, with Virgil, the Roman poet, as his guide. Dante believed his most important work to be De Vulgare Eloquentia, which is the book he published that translated the Tuscan vernacular, which is only a spoken language at the time, into an Italian written language. What that did is it allowed people to start writing and reading in Italian, so the average Italian person could finally read without learning the complexities of the Latin language. He's also a great boundary between the Middle Ages and the start of the Renaissance, or the early modern period, because he was an author, and not an author that was subsidized by the Pope or some nobleman or something like that. He was an entrepreneur. He made his money by writing and selling what he wrote. And yeah, he would only handwrite a few copies, but then he could sell them and people would share them, and he made money as an entrepreneur, and that's an amazing thing at that time. The next generation comes with Francesco Petrarch and Boccaccio. Petrarch wrote these gorgeous love sonnets and love poems. He also went out and found the works of Cicero, another Roman poet, in a set of ancient ruins, and he had an incredible grasp over the Latin language and the Italian language and wrote in both. So then you've got Boccaccio, on the other hand, who's a little more crude. Boccaccio liked to write these racy stories about priests tricking women into having sex with them, and horses who also had sex with people, and all kinds of really odd, racy stories that you would think would have been banned by the church, but for some reason they were hugely popular. Either way, these two guys continue to pave the way into this new early modern period because they're creating culture that it's highly read and highly acclaimed, that people are interested in. And this is when noblemen will start to get really excited about literature and start becoming patrons of the arts, with guys like this and guys like Giotto, the architect and artist. As all of these amazing people continue to travel the world and produce new amazing works, a new socio-political ideology starts to take the stage as a result of them. And it's a thing called humanism. Humanism is, in a very oversimplified way, the belief that every person has the ability to achieve something amazing by virtue of the fact that they're human, that your human opinion and abilities matter. This goes pretty contrary to the church's view, which is that kind of predetermined, you're going to do what God tells you to do view, which a lot of people still believe in at the time, but these artists and these cultured people are starting to take the humanist approach. Skipping ahead a bit, Lorenzo Valla, who's born in 1406, is another really cool example of the shift. He got a church education, a very, very good church education at all the best institutions, but he eventually had to leave the church religious institution, and it's because he was too inquisitive and too critical. Every time he would read something, he would ask too many questions and poke holes in all of these different religious ideologies, and you can't do that as a member of the clergy. And this is one of the first big instances of a questioning of the church. Everyone still believes in the church at this point. Don't get me wrong, the church is still hugely powerful. But this is one of the first instances of them starting to get questioned, and for people to start kind of poking and prodding them, saying, hey, are you telling us everything? And one last individual that helped kickstart the early modern period, this one not in Florence for a change, is a guy by the name of Johann Gutenberg, inventor of the Gutenberg press in 1448. Only a few years later, the printing press had taken off all across Europe, creating jobs and guilds and opportunities for all kinds of people. Even though he was dead, Dante could now tell the masses about the layers of hell. Petrarch could express his love to all of the admirers all over Europe, and Boccaccio could make rude jokes to thousands of people at a time. With the stage set, humanism at the center, flanked by the literature, poetry, and art of the time, the famous culture of the Renaissance is ready to kick off. Heather, I'll see you next week.